En Europa hoy no puede entrar ningún país que no respete esta dignidad humana igual de discriminación alguna, y que indique con toda claridad que nadie podrá ser condenado a la pena de muerte ni ejecutado. Créanme ustedes que si yo en estos momentos sigo como presidente de esta Comisión Internacional es porque considero que es una de las acciones más equivocadas, aparte de que es irreversible. Fíjense ustedes la inmensa responsabilidad en utilizar eso. Yo creo que es muy importante que Europa en aquel momento después se ha dedicado exclusivamente a cuestiones monetarias, pero que en aquel momento de albores de siglo y de milenio dijera la igual dignidad de todos y la pena de muerte, la ejecución, no debe estar consentida. Y fíjense que a veces, claro que nosotros lo que perseguimos es la abolición, pero a veces lo que buscamos es, al menos como primer paso, la moratoria, porque decimos, lo que es importante es que no se ejecute, lo que es importante es que no se cometa un acto irreversible. Ahora estamos confrontados, como ustedes saben, con procesos potencialmente irreversibles en el cambio climático, en la extrema pobreza, en la amenaza nuclear. Pero tenemos todos siempre que tener presente que el hecho de que cometamos algo que ya no tenga posibilidad de retorno es todavía peor. Por eso tenemos que proclamar, y a mí hacerlo hoy aquí delante de los representantes de este gran, porque es muy importante, este gran colectivo de personas que ahora van viendo cómo ha terminado la discriminación que pesaba injustamente sobre ellos. Yo encuentro que es muy importante que digamos a los que todavía ejecutan, a los que todavía condenan a muerte, a los que pertenecen a colectivos que no son los que a ellos les parecen adecuados. Yo les recuerdo que hubo un momento, en el año 1933, en que había un canciller de Weimar, que se llamaba Adolf Hitler, que escribió en un libro llamado Mein Kampf, mi lucha, escribió diciendo: la raza aria es incompatible con la raza judía. Ya sabemos lo que pasó después. Por tanto, no podemos tolerar. Yo les ruego a ustedes que sean especialmente cuidadosos para denunciar cualquier paso, cualquier manera de violar lo que es fundamental. Todos los seres humanos iguales en dignidad, y además la abolición total, o al menos el aplazamiento, la moratoria contra la pena de muerte. En el día de hoy, 104 países, somos 193 en las Naciones Unidas. Ya saben que en las Naciones Unidas somos 193 países, más un país que, como fue una secesión insular de la China continental, no cuenta, que es Formosa. Pues de estos 193 países ya tenemos la suerte de que en 104 hay la abolición, es decir, legalmente ya no existe la pena de muerte. Pero después hemos logrado que en muchos, aunque no se ha conseguido todavía la abolición desde un punto de vista constitucional o legal, ya sabemos que han decidido ya no ejecutar. Y además, el terrible corredor de la muerte, ustedes se imaginan el corredor de la muerte, someter a una persona, pues también ha sido ya en la mayor parte de estos países eliminado. Así, muy en resumen, de los 193 países, en 104 países se ha abolido la pena de muerte. Y en el año 2016, el año pasado, al menos en 23 países de todo el mundo se llevaron a cabo algunas ejecuciones. Los que más destacan, desgraciadamente, son China, Irán, Arabia Saudí, Irak y Pakistán, por el número de ejecuciones que han llevado a cabo en estos años pasados. Pero también les tengo que decir, y lo digo con enorme pena, a pesar de que hemos logrado en estos últimos años que 6 estados de los Estados Unidos también hayan decidido la abolición o la moratoria, pero les tengo que reconocer que es un malísimo ejemplo. Porque hay muchos países que cuando les decimos, hombre, pero ¿cómo puede ser que ustedes estén ejecutando? La respuesta es, ¿por qué no convence usted al gobernador de Texas? ¿Por qué no convence usted a los más de 30 estados todavía de los Estados Unidos? La verdad es que la mayor parte de ellos están gobernados por gobernadores republicanos. Y el Partido Republicano ya sabemos que no es muy partidario ni del multilateralismo ni de seguir estas pautas de los derechos humanos. Pero todos tenemos que procurar, sabiendo lo que está pasando, que cesen estos estados, porque, como les repito, cuando hablo con los representantes de Irán o con los representantes de Pakistán, me dicen, sí, nosotros también estamos pensando, pero ¿por qué permiten ustedes que todavía en Estados Unidos haya tantos estados, los estados más conservadores, que siguen ejecutando y que sigan teniendo la pena de muerte? Es más, a veces ha habido países, como por ejemplo Cuba, que aceptaron la moratoria, no podían poner, porque a los cubanos les seguía pasando lo peor en algunos estados de los Estados Unidos, pero lo que sí que se logró fue que hubiera esta moratoria y que no haya habido ejecuciones. También tengo que decirles que hay un informe, que además es de la Asociación Internacional de ILGA y el GA, que ha comunicado que hay hoy 33 países en África, 23 en Asia y 8 o 10 en América. No quiere decir que maten, que ejecuten a los que pertenecen a estos colectivos, pero sí que al menos los criminalizan o a veces siembran el odio y les hacen la vida muy difícil. ¿Por qué? Pues porque todavía hay sectores de estas sociedades donde es muy difícil que acepten esta igual dignidad de todos los seres humanos. Hay dos casos en los que yo les también quiero recordar, que son Arabia Saudita y Yemen, donde la manera que tienen además de considerar, sobre todo en el caso del homosexualismo femenino, las formas en que a veces incluso se mata por lapidación, todo eso yo creo que lo estamos logrando controlar o al menos disminuir en los últimos años, pero lo que sí que es cierto es que ustedes tienen algo muy importante que manifestar y que hacer valer. Tienen ustedes que recordar a todos lo que yo les ponía como ejemplo antes de esta Europa al entrar en el siglo III y en el milenio III y en el siglo XXI, que es decir, los estados que forman parte de Europa hoy consideran que la dignidad está por encima y que por tanto la abolición es absolutamente necesaria. Queridos amigos, no voy a prolongar más esta reunión, pero sí decirles que estaremos muy atentos, tanto en la Comisión Internacional contra la Pena de Muerte, como en el Instituto Demos Paz de la Universidad Autónoma. Estaremos muy atentos a sus declaraciones finales, con el fin de, en la medida en que nos pertenezca a nosotros actuar, tanto en el caso de derechos humanos y de cultura de paz, como en el caso de aplicación de la pena de muerte para las personas que pertenecen a estos colectivos, nuestra colaboración más entusiasta. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for highlighting again our shortcomings as humans to hold the human rights that we are already agreed on. But mostly, thank you very much for your encouragement. And seeing this plenary, I know we have an optimistic future. I hope so. The next point on this plenary is ask you to contribute your ideas and suggestions and drop them in the inbox. They have been reviewed and the declaration has been adjusted, especially to emphasize more diversity. And I want to let you know that the declaration that is going to be read here today will also be read tomorrow in the Spanish Senate for the politicians and some foreign politicians that are currently here in Madrid. So I would like to ask Diego Carrocho. He's professor for ethics and philosophy at the university here, and he will read the declaration. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Es para mí un honor tomar la palabra en un lugar tan difícil después de Federico Mayor Zaragoza, pero tengo una ventaja, y es que el texto que vamos a leer no es mío, no lo he hecho yo, lo hemos hecho entre todos. Hemos tratado de recoger las propuestas a través del email, a través del buzón, y sobre todo debo agradecer también al Instituto de Mosfaz el haber aportado su conjunto de expertos para poder, catalizar las sensibilidades y las propuestas que de su parte, de la parte de todos vosotros, de todas vosotras, nos han llegado. De modo que, con la esperanza de que algún día dejen de ser necesarias estas declaraciones, estas podrían, y subrayo la dimensión condicional, ser algunas conclusiones que nos reúnen en el día de hoy. En Madrid, España, a 28 de junio del año 2017. Las personas aquí reunidas en el marco de la organización y celebración de esta Conferencia Mundial de Derechos Humanos del World Pride Madrid 2017, que ha congregado a más de 200 ponentes de 46 países, de los 5 continentes, entre activistas, políticos, educadores y miembros de la cultura, con las representaciones destacadas de la ONU, el Parlamento Europeo, la Comisión Europea, ILGA Europe, ILGA World, Outright International, Victory Institute, Interpride, EPOA, Amnistía Internacional, UNICEF, Cruz Roja, Comisión Internacional contra la Pena de Muerte, Instituto de Mosfaz, UAM, Instituto Universitario de Estudios de la Mujer, el Instituto de la Mujer y para la Igualdad de Oportunidades, el Instituto de Derechos Humanos Bartolomé de las Casas de la Universidad Carlos III, con la implicación de las embajadas de Alemania, Países Bajos, Suecia, Suiza, Reino Unido, Italia, Canadá y los Estados Unidos de América, con la presencia de delegaciones del Gobierno de Buenos Aires, Costa Rica y Uruguay, con el apoyo de la Comunidad de Madrid, el Ayuntamiento de Madrid, el Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores y de Cooperación, el Ministerio de Sanidad, Servicios Sociales e Igualdad y el Parlamento Europeo. Tenemos como fin claro y motivo la promoción y defensa y protección de los derechos universales de las personas y el establecimiento de unas bases fundamentales en lo que a los derechos humanos en relación con la orientación afectivo-sexual y la identidad de género se refiere, y teniendo como marco común de referencia y asumiendo declaraciones o principios vigentes, como la Declaración Universal de los Derechos Humanos, los principios de Yogyakarta o la Declaración sobre Orientación Sexual e Identidad de Género de las Naciones Unidas, recordamos que todos los seres humanos nacen libres e iguales en dignidad y derechos, y que toda persona tiene derecho al disfrute de los derechos humanos, sin distinción alguna de raza, color, sexo, idioma, religión, opinión política o de cualquier otra índole, origen nacional o social, posición económica, nacimiento o cualquier otra condición. Asentimos al hecho de que en su condición de derechos universales, complementarios, indivisibles e interdependientes, no podrán realizarse distinciones que afecten a ninguna persona o colectivo en función de su orientación afectiva o sexual y por cuestiones de identidad de género. Reconocemos la especial vulnerabilidad de aquellas personas cuyas preferencias, prácticas, orientaciones e identidades afectivas, sexuales y de género son o han sido discriminadas, censuradas, perseguidas, silenciadas o juzgadas hasta con penas crueles e inhumanas por parte de estados, sociedades y culturas, sin otra causa o motivo que su falta de conformidad con un canon normativo y mayoritario. Entendemos que el momento histórico en el que nos encontramos y sus exigencias nos comprometen a estar a la altura de las demandas de la sociedad y las generaciones futuras y el entorno natural, respetando y prolongando la memoria de todos aquellos seres humanos que nos precedieron, reforzando la necesidad de preservar una perspectiva ajena a todo sesgo dominante que sea multicultural, intergeneracional, interseccional, sensible a la diversidad familiar, regional o a la igualdad de género. Observamos, acogemos y celebramos las diversas conquistas en materia de derechos humanos que se vienen adquiriendo en estos últimos años y, sin embargo, suscribimos la necesidad de seguir unidos en el esfuerzo y la lucha por los derechos de todas las personas, dadas las múltiples vulneraciones que se cometen en gran parte del mundo. Afrontamos con responsabilidad y cautela los escenarios que son consecuencia de aquellas nuevas formas de dominación, violencia y colonización que han surgido a partir del desarrollo de las nuevas formas de comunicación digital. Nos hacemos sensibles por ello de la falta de un tratamiento específicamente regulado en cuanto a la información, imagen, visibilidad y sensibilidad se refiere, y a los vacíos legales relativos a la privacidad, al honor e intimidad, recalcando la necesidad de un libre acceso a la información para todas las personas, siempre y cuando esto no signifique un instrumento de vigilancia y control por parte de gobiernos, empresas o personas con fines de manipulación, censura y represión. Enfatizamos la necesidad de procurar un especial cuidado a la infancia y a sus derechos, en su condición especial de vulnerabilidad, asumiendo la Declaración de los Derechos del Niño y la Convención de los Derechos del Niño. Exponemos que la comunidad referida en cuestiones de orientación afectivo-sexual e identidad de género puede reconocerse como LGTBIQA+, con el propósito de dar realidad a través del lenguaje a cada una de las diferentes identidades de género, personas lesbianas, gays, transexuales, bisexuales, intersexuales, queer, asexuales, y acogemos el símbolo más como signo de inclusión, apertura e integración que asuma identidades como dos espíritus, Leiti, Fafafine, Tigra, Bandu, Kinar, Mushe y cualesquiera otros rubros que sirvan y asistan a la conformidad identitaria, binaria o no, de cualquier persona. Asimismo, con esta denominación se aspira a preservar el legítimo derecho a la diferencia y la libertad individual, afianzando la convicción de que cualquier definición, propuesta, agrupamiento o conceptualización deberá construirse siempre con vistas a preservar los derechos, las sensibilidades y la promoción de cada vida. Reconocemos la necesidad de avanzar hacia la equidad en el derecho a la salud y la información de las personas LGTBIQA+, a través de medidas concretas en el ámbito de la investigación, formación y acceso a los cuidados sanitarios. Defendemos la promoción de medidas normativas, prácticas, retóricas y discursivas que redunden en la defensa y protección de los derechos humanos que en su condición universal deben amparar con especial cuidado a todas aquellas personas y comunidades vulnerables que, como la LGTBIQA+, son señaladas, distinguidas, discriminadas, perjudicadas, juzgadas, despreciadas, condenadas, torturadas o ejecutadas en virtud de sus opciones o orientaciones sexuales, afectivas o de identidad de género. Hacemos un llamamiento a todas las personas a hacer uso de su derecho de manifestación y unión pacífica, fórmula bien conocida históricamente para la conquista de los derechos, sean estos cualesquiera, y a la necesidad de celebración y vindicación de los logros conseguidos, así como la necesidad de denunciar los escenarios de vulnerabilidad aún no tratados. Confiando en que desde esta clausura de la Conferencia Mundial de Derechos Humanos del World Pride Madrid 2017 y el comienzo del World Pride de Nueva York en el 2019, se mantenga y se preserve y se cultive el avance y la conquista de una humanidad libre de discriminación. Confiamos, reivindicamos y solicitamos que la comunidad internacional acepte como oportuna e indispensable la formulación y el acuerdo de una convención internacional en los próximos años, que sirva para asentar el camino iniciado por esta conferencia en cuanto a los derechos humanos para el colectivo LGTBIQA+ se refiere. Muchas gracias.
We should have had a sunflower now. Big music, big sound. Thank you very much for reading the declaration. I hope sincerely that it finds the right ears and people, policymakers, and that they take on what we have declared today. During this conference, 200 speakers shared their insight, knowledge, enthusiasm on diverse issues concerning challenges and problems that individuals and groups of diverse sexuality and gender face today. I realized that modern technology offers us a range of tools to better work together, to campaign, to lobby for our causes. It's never been easier to find like-minded people and to form groups and share information and getting organized. Yet, technology is also the driver for fragmentation and special interest, sometimes dividing our movement and community, causing unnecessary friction. Once again, I have been also during this conference brought to mind how important it is to listen, 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 before we come to conclusions. We need to sometimes step back and see the full picture instead of the puzzle pieces. So after hearing this declaration, we will take a step back and look at the next steps and outlooks that we need to achieve to become a strong movement around the world. And to start this papers. To start the first speech will be Maurice Tomlinson. He's a Jamaican lawyer and he lives in Canada, but he's working for LGBTIQA+ rights in the Caribbean. Please welcome Maurice Tomlinson.
Thank you. I'm going to try and I have a couple of recommendations. And the first one is to acknowledge that religion plays a very significant role in the retention of laws that criminalize same-gender intimacy in 73 countries around the world. And we need to understand that politics feeds on religion and religion feeds on politics. It's very incestuous. So we need to find a way to have more engaging dialogues with religious groups on this issue. To World Pride, I want to remind you that this is supposed to be World Pride, and it's tragic that there's only one person from the Caribbean representing the entire region, and the fact that the region is nuanced. There are large countries and small countries. The situations are very different. So I'm hoping that the next World Pride will be a World Pride. And also, please remember that food is a basic human right, and the fact that some persons who participated in this event from some economically challenged situations and spoke had to go into their own pockets is shameful. It shouldn't happen again. For governments, I'm going to ask you to be bold, principled, and consistent. I have spoken to the representative of Canada before that I was disappointed in the approach that the Canadian group in the LGBT core group at the OAS took on a particular issue. They would have been a lot more vocal in a private conversation, but they needed to be a lot more forceful in the core group. There was a lot of timidity, and I think it was because they were doing horse trading around votes, and they threw the LGBT community under the bus. It can't happen again, right? Be consistent. We're depending on you. For prides internationally, I'd like you to share the wealth, okay? I have been going around and literally begging prides to let me have your leftover swag for my pride in Jamaica, Montego Bay Pride. You need to understand that prides in economically challenged area in criminalized contexts are not only political, they're life-saving. This is a place that we can actually party safely. Many of us don't have any other spaces, and to go to other spaces to be ourselves would incur death. Right? So twin with a LGBT pride in a depressed community or an economically challenged community or criminalized context. Share the wealth, share the knowledge. Also to NGOs, I want you to understand that you're working in country to change situations, but there are diaspora groups who want to help you. Many of us had to flee geographically, but we have not fled emotionally. We want to continue to support the work on the ground. So please don't say because you've left you no longer have anything to contribute. For example, in Canada, we have a group called Dignity Initiative, which is trying to twin diaspora groups with groups on the ground to push the issue of LGBT liberation, because it all concerns us, right? To companies, where's my friend? To companies, I'm going to ask you to be consistent with your corporate values. You can't just be vomiting all over pride in your home country, and in the host country where you're working as an MNC, you won't discuss the issue of LGBT rights, you won't raise the issue of LGBT rights. And be consistent in exporting or dealing with your corporate values. And I'm not specifically speaking to you because your organization has been not so bad. But, you know, sadly you're the representative of the entities. Those who have been suggesting a boycott or aid conditionalities, etc., I want to end on a positive note. Boycotts are not as effective as engagement. Please consider engaging with people on the ground. If you visit, engage with your hotel staff, your taxi driver, etc. Because that might be the first time they're having a constructive conversation that's not, you know, sensationalized about LGBT realities. So please engage. I'd like to end my talks by using this acronym, ARE. Acknowledge, respect, and engage. Acknowledge that a lot of the homophobia we're facing in the global south came from the global north. You gave us the laws and the religion and the culture of homophobia. Acknowledge that you have homophobia dealing with as well. So please keep the finger wagging and the homo nationalism to you know, a minimum. And please respect our local leaders when you're engaging with them. Respect them because they may be bastards, but they are our bastards. You respect them, you respect our democratic process. Okay? Just like how you respect yours. Right? You can be principled but respectful. And respect that there are people on the ground doing work. We do not need salvation. We need support, but we don't need salvation. Okay? And finally, as I've said before, engage. When you come, engage by selling the positives of inclusion. That works far better than always the finger wagging and the bad mouthing of our nation. Where we are where you were, but the fact is you transition, and we can too. We're all capable of inclusive, respectful dialogue. Doesn't matter the color of our skin or the shape of our eyes. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for World Pride for having me.
You obviously have got the respect and the engagement. Thank you very much for your words, Morris. Next, I would like Zanele Mupoli. visual activist and photographer from South Africa.
Yes.
Holger.
Yes, as promised. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is a great day for me, speaking in front of you and being amongst important people. I'll keep it straight, simple and short if possible. Honestly, I'm lamenting the presence of Black LGBTI people, whereas Maurice is talking about just the Caribbean, you know. When I came here, I was like wondering, are there any Black people in Spain? Are there any Black people who are living on the fringes of the society who represent the same community or the kind of people that I work with, who had to get opportunities to be at spaces like this and sleep at nice hotels that I get an opportunity to be at? And maybe we could help next time to mobilize the communities and start communicating with those groups in advance before the conference happens, so that we could share, you know, our experiences, what is happening on the other side, and also learn what is happening at the local level. Now, my contribution. The conference is not well documented for the number of important sessions that took place. Some people couldn't get to be at other sessions because things parallel. And it means that those who really wanted to go to two panels couldn't attend the other panels simply because of the clashing periods. I wish that each and every room or each and every panel is fully documented and have that material archived, so those who were not there get to go to the library and have access to those materials, especially those who applied and did not get an opportunity to come to these spaces. And also that could be used, you know, by people at different universities like this one. We put this material in ethnography, sociology department, and then people have access and have an understanding that something like this happened. There are so many people who came before me, before us. People like Danny, who educated us earlier on. People like Sri, who presented a trailer of his film. They spoke about the importance of documentation. And I think that it's very important that we listen, like you mentioned, to those who came before us. They might not be flamboyant and be beautiful as most of us here, but those people have a lot of information that we may not like us to see them going down the grave, you know, with their information. We need to listen and collect that information from those who were never, you know, documented or who never had their life stories archived. From my end, there are so many milestones that were won in South African history, but then still things are divided. You find that communities have their own packages and way of like doing things. I think that as communities, as LGBTI communities, integration is very important without pretending that we are Rainbow Nation, knowing exactly that other people really do not feel that they are part of that Rainbow Nation. In as much as it's talking human rights, I don't believe that, or I think that nothing much was fully covered when it comes to sports. Sport become one of the major issues for most LGBTI people. Those who are energetic, those who may wish to be energetic, but due to maybe ill health, they can't. So sport is another way in which we could build a better movement and promote health and health living, which wasn't much touched. An issue of education. I come from a space where most LGBTI people do not have much education. People were sidelined from early because of the system that excluded a lot of people due to their race. Like I come from South Africa with apartheid system where a lot of black people had poor education system in place. And it meant that people couldn't even get jobs after completing matric, which is your grade 12. And it meant that our people were left behind. So there are so many people in black communities who do not have access to different spaces because they do not have qualifications. And it means that we need to provide scholarships for people in those communities. It's one thing to fund an NGO, but it's something else to fund communities in which everyone teach one in order for the community to progress. And then many people are able to go to colleges, at universities, and in that way they will have an understanding of what all these human rights are all about. Especially when it comes to research, where people really don't get it when what we talk about, like quantitative, and we're talking about human beings and their lives. We need to sensitize our medical doctors. I think this was the proper space in which also we talk like medicine beyond one bit which is always focused on, without saying that it shouldn't be focused, but there are a lot of issues that people are suffering from. And I'm not saying we should bring the cancer issues into space, but a lot of our communities, especially activists, are perishing from either cancer and other, chronic disease. And I think that that element should be brought here, and it shouldn't be when a person is gone and not seen from this radar, that person is gone and forgotten. So that should be brought, especially at this at the platform like this one. The media becomes a big thing for me. In Africa, especially in places where homosexuality is outlawed, people can't produce or create their own citizen journalism or community media. So we would like to learn from media experts from this end. How can people play it safe in places like Uganda got the format, they are doing it, but in places like Somalia, in places beyond just Nigeria, the common spaces that you get to read about, but in places like Mayotte, where no gay person goes, which is one of the countries that is still colonized by the French in Africa, those people need information in which they could have an understanding of what is going on in platforms like this one. And there's a need for the support of LGBTI artists. In Canada, you have your best artists like Natalie Wood, like Michelle Clark, like many people that I met when I was there. But then you find that only few individuals get to have their work seen in those platforms. We have a lot of major mainstream spaces in which we as a community could easily penetrate. Spaces like Documenta, places like Venice Biennale, places like Sao Paulo Biennale, and many homophobic spaces in Africa, like that art where there was an exhibition with homosexual content which was shut down simply because of the materials that were brought in place. We need to use the arts as our own means of articulation and think beyond the arts, the march as a way in which we could push an agenda. But art, LGBTIQIA artists and their work should be recognized, and we need to also vote for those people for big prizes, because the work that they are doing is as verified as any other person's work. My last one. When we have meetings like this, and we know that the people who are on the panel, they have published maybe some material, literature, and so on and so on. I think it would be best if those people could bring that material and share it with other individuals here who are lonely, or maybe never even read a gay or lesbian, novel or material. We have Thomas Clay, who has written widely. We have a lot of other people, and introduce also some works of other individuals that we think that would be key to the next person, regardless of that person's age. But lastly, at least to have a screening. After attending the conference back and forth from panels, you need to chill, ease up a bit. And you just need to watch something that is light while you're doing your other things, in as much as you are requested to prepare for the next panels and on. The conference, sometimes they tend to be heavy. How do you then unwind? It becomes an issue. So let's have our own people in the room who have maybe published whatever, who have released whatever documentation, and have just one night of screening just to unwind and then carry on. Thank you.
thank you, Sanele, for sharing your constructive input and also some creative ideas. And I'm sure our organizers sitting here in the room will pick up on them. And there will be other World Prides coming and other conferences, and we can always improve. So thank you very much for your insight. Next is Gopi Shankar. He is activist, writer, and founder of the Shrishti Madurai LGBTQIA+ student volunteer movement in India.
Namaste. So, we all live in a world where we love to label everything, what we see, what we do. Do we really own our body, right over our body? So, in the journey of self-realization, in the intersections of gender and sexuality, I discovered the dose of truth is there. So every person who go through that very kind of self-exploration of their own sex, gender and sexual orientation and romantic orientation is a Buddha. So first I should accept myself who I am, the very kind of war within me, the two faces in me. So then it's about the society. So if I'm not accepting who I am, the society will not accept what I am. So to be here in this World Pride Festival, I need to I earn like $200+, which I worked for 15 days, day and night. I'm not affiliated to any NGO. When I even contested an election as a first intersex candidate, I funded my own election campaign. So, the thing is, my question is, LGBT individual, is it necessary that individuals should be affiliated to an NGO or a non-governmental organization or any organization which receives funds? No. So, it's about creating awareness, reaching the very kind of unreached spaces. And the word they use is advocacy. For our advocacy, we don't need money. We need heart and clarity on the subject. And we need to create change makers and evangelize LGBTQIA+ issues to create awareness. But I don't know how far we are, progressive on that. And a country like India, with so much diversity, even with its own gender, sex, and sexual minority identities, it's like, very hard to put forth the very kind of struggle there. So, except 3 countries, all other countries in the world is like saying that you should only live as male or female or a trans, not as an intersex person. So who is this government to tell me about my body? So in a search of where I live in my body, I explored it through my gender and sexual and sex identity, that stuff. My gender, sex, sexual orientation is just one aspect of my life that is not all about my life. And I don't know why people cling on, yeah, I was born as an intersex, and I'm a genderqueer person and an aromantic gay. But it's not necessary for me to have an affiliation with an NGO, non-governmental organization, or some kind of groups. So we are the longest floating student volunteer movement in India, which reach the unreached spaces. So I have the privilege, and I'm representing those who don't have that privilege, the voices unheard. So people are here from Canada. Canada is part of Commonwealth. And this particular draconian colonial law, IPC 377, which is not directly referring to homosexuality but to unnatural sex, a Christian law, is part of most of the Commonwealth nations. I wish Canada should work on it. If Canadian president is so influential, he must work on it. Because day-to-day life in non-metropolitan cities is something, it's not easy for us. And when someone organizes some national level meeting in India, or it only happens in metropolitan cities, we never bother about two-tier cities. I always say Madrid is not Spain, Chennai is not Tamil Nadu, or Delhi is not India. So, a wider range of engagement, and we need to engage all those unreached people, and we need to find out the strategy to do that. And it should come from the advocacy group, not affiliated with any non-governmental organizations, or because these NGOs failed to educate the policymakers, the lawmakers, in India especially. They didn't achieve anything. What we achieved in the past 7 years, without a single penny, no one funded us. They failed to achieve. We don't know what crores of money, where it went to. So we are sitting in a beautiful AC-packed hall. Meanwhile, every year 10,000 newborn intersex babies are dying in India. So where I get the census from, doctor themselves are telling what they are doing to the newborn babies. Newborn babies cannot come with a rainbow flag and protest on the street. So first, I should talk about the discrimination within the community. I'm not discriminated by someone who is on the road, a public. All these NGOs fail to educate the people within the community about the diversity within the community. We talk a lot about diversity, but we forget the diversity within our community. Everyone have their own gender pronouns. When they have the gender pronouns are created to break the heteronormative structure of this stupid society. When someone is addressing me as something else in which I don't want to be, I feel like I'm on fire. So, and also we need to engage differently abled and physically challenged intersex people and asexuals. We don't have space for physically challenged and differently abled people in India or in developing nations or underdeveloped nations. I have hands, mouth to talk, but those who don't have that, what these NGOs did to them and how they reached them. I'm not only questioning them, I'm working for it, so I'm questioning it. I'm working without a penny from all of these people, and I have all the right to question them, I believe. And I'm trying to create a strategy through working through schools. India is a country where a 30-year-old woman in rural village will not have a knowledge about what is menstruation. And working in such a space and talking about sex, gender and sexuality and got banned by many government institutions, which these NGOs never tried to do that. So pride parades and this beautiful segments and meetings are not everything. Last year, in my own community, 5 people died and one girl, trans woman, was burned to death by the Hijra Guru. The case was filed, but no action was taken. Where were these NGOs? Where were these NGOs? In the national level meeting, they were pleasing the UNAIDS fund. For centuries, they are using, for more than decades, they are using HIV fund for LGBT activism. I'm not against HIV people or anyone. It needs to be inclusive. But the steps are not constructive at all. They cannot get some funds for something and use it for something else. Making trans women to supply condom, distribute condom on the middle of the streets in India in the name of project intervention, a targeted intervention, is such a stupid thing. And no transgender bill law which was passed in India went against or questioned the very kind of human rights why women, I need to pay tax to my guru. So this particular girl whom we rescued from forced sex work in India, she was like 2 years begging to the guru, that elder person, the trans woman, and she was like telling, oh, now you underwent operation, so you look like a woman and you bet and gave the money. So now you go to hammam and do sex work daily. They need to meet at least 4 to 5 people, customers. And all the money will go to, there's a big mafia working behind this indigenous gender minority identities in India. None of the NGOs dare to question it, because if they question it, all the HIV funds will be stopped. I questioned it. They asked me to remove my trousers to prove whether I'm an intersex person. So let us first start with educating our own community about all the diversity in the community. Let me not club up all the different identities as one. We are here to, challenge the rules and always to be in the out of box. If something is in order, we should question it. Because there is nothing called in order. But when we are trying to homogenize our own community, other diverse identities are hidden. I'm telling this with a pain. Thank God I am not operated as something else in my childhood because of my maternal grandmother. With all struggle, I never share sympathetic stories about myself anyway. I'm here as an intersex person, and there are thousands and thousands of intersex people are living around the globe like me. So give a space to them. Give a space to them. Create a space to them. So we need to define and differentiate the identities first. What is what? In India we talk a lot about, but we don't know who are transgender people. For them, transgender means only trans women, and that too indigenous Hijra or Arvani, not trans women. So many of the trans women don't want to identify with the Hijra community there. And we do, even though, I don't know, developed nations like Canada or US have a trans women as cops, senior officials. In Tamil Nadu, we have people like Apsara Reddy, a senior journalist, a trans woman senior journalist. She is biggest political party spokesperson, one of the third largest political party spokesperson, is a trans woman in India. And we have trans women who are senior officials, bureaucrats. But for intersex people people, they are misidentifying them as sometimes as trans women too. That's wrong. But we are working on to define and differentiate the identities. So let me end with this. So commercialization. I'm an individual, and let me be an individual. So if I'm an LGBT person, it's not necessary for me to have an affiliation with an NGO to recognize what I am and who I am. So let me first educate the community about the diversity, then we will go to the society and educate them. Thank you.
For your very open and very strong words. I think you reached the people. And,
It will create some impact.
I hope so, yeah. Next speaking to us is Ellen Kennedy. She's the Co-Secretary General of ILGA and Executive Director of EGAL.
Thank you. Well, I'm the big bad NGO on this panel. Kofi, I couldn't agree with you more, actually, on so many of your issues. Yes, I am the Co-Secretary General of ILGA, which is the International LGBTI Human Rights Organization. I'm based in Canada. My day job that pays my rent is with EGAL, Canada's LGBTI Q2S, which is the term for our Indigenous Canadians Human Rights Organization. I want to give a shout out to our folks in the crowd from Germany who are on the eve of their government voting for marriage. I think this is really great news, but I also want to caution that marriage is not the great panacea for LGBTIQ2S human rights. We have in Canada fantastic legislation. We're blessed with now a progressive government with a special advisor on LGBTI Q2S human rights to our Prime Minister, Randy Wassenaw, who's here with us today. We're incredibly fortunate. But that in itself is not enough to encourage and to change attitudes towards LGBTI people. We're the only group in society where it's illegal to be who we are. I don't know of any other group that has had to change legislation in order to exist. So these are issues that we need to fight to continue to change, and we need to be more inclusive as a movement. As Gopi has said, and my panelists before me, we're not inclusive. We don't look through an intersectional lens when we're doing this work. We can barely say the words intersex. We can barely say the words bisexual. Right? These are all issues that need to be addressed, and we need to look internally first at our own movement before we can change the world. I think, though, it's very important before we leave here to understand implicitly that we do have a duly elected mechanism, and we are an NGO, to continue this conversation in a democratic, open way. ILGA is an organization of 1,200 members from 132 countries. That's a movement. That's a voice. And that is a voice that needs to hear people like Gopi. That is a voice that we have regions from every corner of this world. We have 6 regions. We have 6 regional boards that are elected from within their own region. We're the only organization in the world that duly elects democratically LGBTI people to run the organization. That is huge. That is a movement that we need to be aware of, we need to take advantage of, and we need to continue the dialogue through. We have an office in Geneva, and I know many of you probably heard our human rights, the head of our UN advocacy department, Andre, this morning, talking about the work that we do at the UN in Geneva, in New York, and also through the treaty bodies. That's key. We bring folks from all over the world to Geneva to talk about the issues within their regions. You don't have to be a wealthy NGO. My own organization, EGAL, I always say we're all milking from the same cow. All of us are trying to chase the same dollar. And it's dividing us as a community. It's dividing us as communities. Whereas if in each of our regions we mobilize, and we mobilize through an infrastructure that already exists, called ILGA World, then we can really change the world in a democratic way. We have offices in Johannesburg. We have an office in Asia, in Bangkok. We have an office in Buenos Aires. We're working on an office in North America and an office in Oceania. There's a conference, ILGA Europe is having its conference in October in Warsaw. The folks who are here from Europe should look to become members of ILGA and ILGA Europe and go to that conference. We have ILGA Asia's conference coming up in December in Cambodia. I don't know if there are folks here from Asia. Please look into joining ILGA Asia and to attending that conference. We're having a Latin American and Caribbean conference in Guatemala in November. Please seek us out. We're there to continue the conversation. This year in Amsterdam, we had an intersex forum for intersex activists from all over the world. We had over 40 intersex people dialogue and network in Amsterdam. It was funded through the Estrella Foundation out of New York, a phenomenal organization that does great work and funds issues and communities that traditionally are difficult to get funds for. These are the communities and these are the areas that we work on to try and continue these conversations. We've had tremendous dialogue here over the course of the last 2 days. We need to ensure that this dialogue continues. And I'm suggesting that you do that through ILGA. I love the title Co-Secretary General. Who wouldn't love to be called Co-Secretary General? My co-chair, Ruth Baldacchino, is from Malta. Ruth and the NGOs in Malta, as we know, have done amazing work in that country to change issues around gender identity, gender expression. They're leading the world on language around gender identity. This is a phenomenal opportunity, I believe, for NGOs and individuals to participate in an organization that has access and it is done in a meaningful, respectful way. I think just to wrap up, we have a diversity of populations within ILGA. We have a diversity of political voices and views, absolutely no doubt. And we also have a diversity of issues that we address. But we're under one banner. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your politics are, but it matters what you do to advance LGBTI human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, for the insight into ILGA, but especially for inviting us to join the conferences of ILGA. So thank you very much. Last, but by no means least, we have, there's my paper, oh my God. Myrna Cunningham. She's advisor to the President of the UN General Assembly for the World Conference of Indigenous People, and she's also President of the Center for the Autonomy and Development of Indigenous People. Please.
Thank you very much.
Natsa, Tutni, Yan. I greet you in the language of my people, the Miskito indigenous nation from Nicaragua. We share in Nicaragua and Honduras territory that was divided by the border, but we are one nation. Se me olvidó que iba a hablar en español. Perdón. Yo creo que el mensaje central que yo me llevo de esta cumbre es que ninguno de nosotros es libre, si todas y todos no somos libres. Definitivamente, a lo largo de las distintas presentaciones que he podido escuchar, de lo que hemos hablado en los pasillos, en las mesas, aquí hemos venido de distintos movimientos que hemos resistido a dictaduras, movimientos que hemos resistido y luchado contra la colonización pasada y presente, movimientos que hemos luchado contra la esclavitud, y obviamente somos parte de un movimiento que en las últimas décadas hemos osado enfrentarnos al patriarcalismo y a todas las distintas formas de opresión, de clase, de castas, de raza, antes de que esos derechos fuesen incorporados en instrumentos de derechos humanos en Naciones Unidas. Nosotros, miembros de pueblos indígenas, hemos tenido nuestros derechos, que los hemos ejercido de forma ancestral. Y esos derechos los hemos tratado de incorporar en estos instrumentos de derechos humanos. Y todas las culturas realmente hemos cuestionado todos estos fundamentalismos antes de que existieran en esos instrumentos. Me parece que lo novedoso de la declaración que escuché esta tarde es que el plus, que debiera de ir antes, ¿verdad? Debiera ser plus LGBT, pero bueno, fue creciendo y ahora está al final, el plus quedó incorporado. ¿Por qué? Porque nosotros desde los pueblos indígenas hemos venido a decirles a ustedes, ese plus ya existía en nuestros pueblos y ustedes han logrado incorporarlo en la declaración. Han podido incluir a los de los dos spirits, han podido incluir a los Mushe, o sea, pero eso que se ha leído, yo diría, en un párrafo esta tarde, refleja el resultado de una lucha de las últimas décadas. Una lucha que ha ido, yo diría, en 3 vías. Por un lado, todos y todas hemos luchado por el establecimiento de estándares de derechos humanos, que nos cubra a todos los seres humanos. Pero también nosotros, desde los pueblos indígenas, hemos luchado podríamos decir, de forma paralela, para complementar esos derechos humanos de las personas con los derechos colectivos de nuestros pueblos. Hemos podido lograr jurisprudencia y hemos podido lograr recomendaciones y prácticas que demuestran que el derecho a la vida tiene que ver con el territorio. El derecho a la salud tiene que ver con el uso de y el control de nuestros recursos naturales. El derecho a la cultura tiene que ver con el derecho al agua. Y hemos de esa forma complementado la teoría y la práctica de los derechos humanos. Pero en la medida en que hemos venido reconquistando derechos humanos, también nos hemos dado cuenta que la colonia, el modelo colonizador, nos había encerrado en un discurso binario, un discurso en donde solo habían 2 opciones, hombres, mujeres, y todas las prácticas que nuestros pueblos tenían de forma ancestral quedaron diluidas. diluidas en esa colonización que puso una visión del mundo, puso unos conocimientos por encima de nosotros, de todo lo que nosotros teníamos. Entonces hemos venido también reconquistando derecho a la diversidad, derecho a las diversidades, diversidad cultural, diversidad étnica, diversidad sexual, y aquí nos hemos encontrado entonces en este evento tratando de articular esas conquistas, las conquistas de derechos humanos, las conquistas de derechos de pueblos indígenas y las conquistas en el campo del derecho a la diversidad. Podemos decir, por lo tanto, que el aporte de esa declaración del día de hoy es que logra comenzar a poner nombre a esas distintas luchas. Y quiero felicitarlos por haber dado ese paso en la declaración. Hemos venido y hemos aprendido, hemos escuchado de muchos de los movimientos, y obviamente podemos decir que hemos escuchado que las prácticas de trabajar en conjunto, las prácticas de interseccionalidad, las prácticas de abordar los problemas de forma transversal, nos han ayudado a avanzar. Hemos podido también aprender en esta reunión de que no podemos, aunque estemos luchando cada uno desde nuestra esquina, podríamos decir, desde nuestro propio espacio, y eso nos ha permitido dar pasos importantes, no vamos a poder enfrentar los enormes desafíos que hay actualmente en el mundo si no nos articulamos. Y entonces podríamos decir, la gran conclusión de esta reunión, desde mi punto de vista, es que tenemos que trabajar juntos, tenemos que construir alianzas, tenemos que aprender a escucharnos, tenemos que aprender a respetarnos, y solo así vamos a poder construir un nuevo mundo en el que todos queremos caber, un nuevo mundo en donde realmente se respete la diversidad y se siga avanzando hacia la igualdad. Un nuevo mundo en donde no tengamos que morir por ser quienes somos, ni morir por luchar por seguir siendo quienes somos, independientemente de donde estemos. Ese mundo es posible. Y creo que el movimiento que se ha juntado en esta cumbre es una expresión de que hay grupos que están trabajando por crear ese nuevo mundo posible. Entonces, muchas gracias por habernos invitado. Los invitamos también nosotros desde el movimiento de pueblos indígenas para seguir construyendo en conjunto, entendiendo que no solo queremos ser el plus, ¿verdad? Queremos transformar realmente la forma como hemos venido trabajando. Estos eventos lo que tienen que hacer es servirnos de inspiración para cambiar la forma en que hemos venido haciendo las cosas. Porque como tenemos múltiples identidades, pues obviamente vivimos las discriminaciones de forma diferente. Podemos cambiar la forma de trabajar, y creo que los distintos planteamientos, incluso que hemos escuchado esta tarde, nos indican que es necesario cambiar, pero que podemos cambiar y podemos seguir trabajando juntos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Nina, for your encouraging words. I would like to open up for about 15 minutes for questions from the audience. There will be a microphone somewhere in the room. Is that? because we need the microphone so that the fabulous team that does the translations can hear us. Because without the microphone they cannot hear what's questions in the room. You have, okay. So, is there any questions? Dean.
Hello, I'm Dean Nelson, founder of Pride House, and this question is maybe more for Helen or anybody in general. In recent months, we've seen a change of administration in the government can put our rights and our achievements at risk. What can we as activists do to help prevent some of our rights being peeled back, as we've seen in America and other places?
Helen? Would you like?
Well, I think it's really important to mobilize our communities. And one of the things that I know, you know, from the work that we did and I know, Dean, you're from Canada, you're a fellow Canadian. One of the things that happened after marriage was one in Canada, that everybody walked away from the conversation. And, you know, because we had achieved everything, according to the folks who won marriage. And as important as marriage is, it is not the defining issue for our communities. And I think organizations within, whether you work as an individual or you work through sport like you do, these are all very important conversations to have, and we have to push back. But we have to use the mechanisms that are available to us, whether we like it or not. These are the existing mechanisms, whether it's the OAS or the UN or our current political systems in our own countries. It's great to see more politicians like our politician Randy, who's an openly gay elected member. He's the first elected member from a jurisdiction in Canada that traditionally has been very homophobic. So this is a good thing, and we have to continue to push back. And these types of conversations in these forums are extremely important. So thank you for that question. There are people around the world in other jurisdictions who've had oppressors. So the fact that it's not new to us in North America, it's relatively new, but it's not a global phenomenon just because we have a Donald Trump in the US.
If I may, I also wanted to pick up on what Helen said by saying one way to ensure that we counter populism is to fight it globally. And we need to think globally, because a lot of the hate that was exported from Canada has found fertile ground in other parts of the world and is now being re-exported. I'll give you a very practical example. In relation to the Church of England. The Church of England sent their religion to Africa, and that also included the anti-sodomy law. Then the Church of England supported decriminalization. Now, Ugandan churches, the Church of Uganda, which is a branch of the Anglican Church, is now sending bishops back to England because they think England has lost its way and is now adrift. So their bishops are now ordaining priests to preach a homophobic message in England. So unless we address the issue globally, it's like a wave. Okay? Just because it's not happening in your neck of the woods doesn't mean it has disappeared. It's just gone somewhere else to hide, to fester, to grow, and it will come back to haunt you. In places like the OAS, in places like the UN. So we need to think of it globally, engage with people on the ground to make sure we're all moving together towards liberation.
I just want to say that, like, I think
just wait a second, the mic.
Yeah. Okay, this is Sridhar Rangan from India. I just want to say that while we're sitting here at the summit today in 17 and discussing over the last few days and also making summaries at this point of time at the closing plenary. I just feel that we need to acknowledge all the work which has done over the decades of work by a whole number of people across the world in bringing about the changes so that we can sit here and actually discuss and be here. And I really sometimes think a lot of times we negate and we just kind of feel that we are restarting the wheel, we are reinventing the wheel and negating all the work which has happened in the past with so many other people. I really want to caution everybody about that in terms of not really forgetting the past and preserving that and acknowledging the past, that where we are today is because of a certain work which was done in the past, and that's where we, and that can take inspiration from that to take and go ahead. Thank you.
The gentleman there.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Felicitaciones por el excelente panel. Esteban Paulón de Argentina. Simplemente quería sumar una preocupación creciente que viene de nuestra región, de América Latina, pero que hemos visto que también se está replicando en algunos otros países, sobre todo de raíz latina y de fuerte incidencia de algunas comunidades religiosas en las decisiones políticas de los gobiernos. Tras la fallida embestida contra la igualdad y a favor de la discriminación enmascarada en lo que se llegó a llamar la ideología del género, que creo que hemos escuchado en muchos países esta idea de la ideología de género como una cuestión de colonialismo del norte global por sobre nuestras propias creencias e idiosincrasia, pero que era un colonialismo que venía a favor de los derechos, ¿no? O sea, la ideología de género venía a colonizarnos y a obligarnos a aceptar y a respetar la diversidad. Ahora estamos viendo una nueva embestida en relación al término de libertad religiosa. Está habiendo en distintos países, en Francia, Perú, Argentina, Chile, países como Argentina, como el mío, que hemos avanzado en derechos. Hoy el gobierno nacional está apoyando una ley de libertad religiosa en el Congreso, en el Parlamento, que implica que con motivo de respetar la libertad individual a profesar una religión, un funcionario o funcionaria pública podría negarse a impartir educación sexual integral en las escuelas, a realizar un matrimonio igualitario, a otorgar un documento a una persona trans en el marco de la ley de identidad de género, o por ejemplo enseñar la teoría de la evolución, porque él podría creer, según su creencia religiosa, que el mundo lo creó Dios en 6 días y al 7º descansó, y para qué va a enseñar la teoría de la evolución. Entonces creo que es un absurdo, pero que está ocurriendo, y que en nombre de la libertad religiosa, entre comillas, están queriendo cercenarse muchas otras libertades que son derechos que hemos conquistado con enorme esfuerzo. Gracias.
Thank you. And as I stated when I began, we have to have dialogue about the intersection between religion and LGBT human rights. We have to have these tough conversations because religion feeds on politics and politics on religion. It's, you know, and it's as you've seen, disgusting, and it's incestuous. One of the things that is particularly troubling to me is that as NGOs, we want to not have these conversations. You know, we want to avoid it because we don't want to favor our religion, etc. But we need to have the tough conversations. I know that in my context in Jamaica, there are some priests who are willing to be out and to push back, and I'm going to give one example. Father Sean Major Campbell, today in Jamaica, he's an Anglican priest who has been fighting the religious right in Jamaica, and he wrote an article today, "Beware the religious tyranny," and he's campaigning against the establishment of theocracy. So there are those priests who are brave enough to say, look, I am a believer, but I don't subscribe to theocracy. We need to find them. We need to amplify their voices, because religious people do not listen to atheists. They'll pray for you, but they won't listen to you. They only listen to each other. So we need to find those voices and amplify them, because that's the only way we're going to break that challenge.
Solo para hacer una aclaración, contarle a Morir y a todos que Nosotros en el proceso de aprobación de la ley de matrimonio igualitario en Argentina trabajamos con todas las religiones y por primera vez en el año 2010 sacerdotes católicos, apostólicos romanos en ejercicio se expresaron públicamente a favor, con imanes, con rabinos, con pastores evangélicos. Se logró eso que vos decías de buscar a los aliados y mostrar que también para las religiones también es compatible la diversidad sexual. Esto otro tiene que ver con algunos factores de poder con los cuales hay que luchar de la mano de todos estos sectores que vos decías que existen y que creo que es una de las armas más poderosas, ¿no? Pegar ahí en ese poder reaccionario que tienen algunas religiones justamente desde adentro con los sectores que son más abiertos.
Thank you.
I just want to add a small point to it. Thing is, there comes also politicizing the cause, you know. So most of the governments are interconnected to the religion, you know. In India, we take oath on constitution, whereas in US it's completely different. And also, most of the LGBT movements are projected in a very leftist manner, where the right government is not comfortable, and they are now recently coming with their own notions on. We had a very kind of Olympian turned homophobic trans person supporting Trump in his campaign, which she had her own, backlash then. But it's about, again, diversity then, you know. It's not about politicizing the cause. Engaging with the politicians are different, and religious teachers and all those people are different, but you know, we should not, engaging with the politicians and religious leaders is different than politicizing and giving a religious color to the cause. So we need to be very careful in that, because it's for the humanity, it's not for a particular political ideology or a religion, or that's something we need to carefully work on with. Because many individuals who identify with a particular identity, then it brings the very kind of, then we are kind of not differentiating ourselves from the rest of the humanity. So because of the identity we are identified with, so there starts the problem. So we should not politicize and give a religious color, but without giving that, we should engage the politicians and religious leaders, and we should have a strategy to do that.
I know we are all tired, so thank you very much for hanging out and staying on. I'm happy with this conference. I hope you have. And